This edition of MacVoices is supported by Take Control Books, the answers you need now from leading experts. Kirk McElhearn's Take Control of LaunchBar is the perfect way to learn about the power and capabilities of this terrific power user utility. But you don't have to be a power user to benefit from LaunchBar. Kirk lets you pick and choose the features that are right for you. Get it now at takecontrolbooks.com. Welcome to MacVoices. This is the Talk of the Mac community. I'm Chuck Joyner. Folks, we have something a little bit different today. We're going to talk about a developer's application platform. I think that's the proper phrase for it or term for it. But we're not going to talk to the developer. They volunteered a developer that actually uses their platform to author something that you're all going to be familiar with. And so we thought it'd be interesting to talk to him, let him explain what it is and how it does it, and why he selected that platform. The platform is called DevMate, and it's from MacPaw. You're probably familiar with them. We've had them on the show before, and they make some great utilities. But this is an application side. So we're all familiar with the utilities we use. Now we're going to talk about the tools that the developers make to make those tools that we use. And the guest for today, who's going to tell us about all this great stuff, is Greg Scown from Smile. Greg, it's great to have you. Thanks for being here in a little different role.
Hi, Chuck. It's always a pleasure.
Yeah, this is going to be different because you're going to now be talking really from a developer's perspective, but not about necessarily your own product, but more about what it's like to develop with DevMate. So I'm going to let you get us started and explain just what DevMate is and tell me how wrong I was in the way I tried to explain it.
I think you've done just fine. Yes, this DevMate is primarily of interest to developers, but I think it might also be of interest to your users to understand a little bit about what do we use for tools and why do we make the choices that we do for these. And so DevMate bills itself as an application development and distribution platform, and it is indeed that, but let's talk about what that means. It includes several components, and those components include the ability to track downloads, the ability to update in the product, so the check for updates mechanism, the ability to license the product in fairly flexible ways, which we would call activation, and includes things like trial licenses with a variety of ways in which you can handle those. They have a framework for customer feedback. They have a framework for crash and issue reporting. And probably most importantly for developers is they have this fantastic dashboard that pulls everything together. And so there we have the opportunity to see the information that the system makes available.
Okay, so I'm kind of surprised right out of the gate because we all have tried software, used the 30-day free trial or whatever, but I don't think I realized that kind of thing could be built into the application that helps you generate your applications.
Sure, it can. I mean, in the sense that they provide a framework, we build the framework into our app, and then we ship with the combination of our app and their framework. This is common. In fact, it's common prior to DevMate in the sense that I'd say a huge percentage of Mac apps uses a framework called Sparkle. And Sparkle is an app updater, and it's the force behind check for update. Now, the place where DevMate makes this a little more interesting is that their version of Sparkle integrates with their dashboard backend and makes things super, super easy that otherwise you have to build your own infrastructure for. For example, you would have to build your own infrastructure to do what's known as a Delta update. And that's where if we do version 5.0.1, you effectively only download the bits of 5.0.1 that have changed since 5.0. And that's clever, and that can be done. But honestly, as a developer, it's kind of complicated. You have to write your own infrastructure for it. And to be honest, we've just never bothered. It's nice, but we hadn't bothered. And it was just fantastic to be able to get this as part of a well-designed system ready to help us out.
So all of us mere mortals would probably recognize that as an incremental backup concept kind of thing.
Exactly, yeah. So instead of getting another 50 megabyte download for PDFpen, you get a 2 megabyte download for PDFpen the next time around.
Right. And in the days of bandwidth caps and mobile services, that can be kind of a big deal.
True. And I mean, it's weird. It's sort of like that which is old is new again. So now it's more important to be doing that. And then frankly, also, it's a waste of your time. And I'm embarrassed that we've wasted people's time in the way that we had, partly because we lack the time ourselves. And so it's really nice to be able to bring something that's demonstrably better to our user base.
For someone like Smile, because you are not a huge software house. You're very, very well thought of and very influential, but you don't have tons and tons of programmers. Why it means a lot that somebody like you would decide to use DevMate. How long ago did you make the switch over, and why?
Sure. So we first were introduced to DevMate at WWDC 2014, so roughly last June. And we figured out immediately that this is a system that was built by developers for developers. It helps us answer the sorts of things that we need to know. It's well designed, and it's clearly the backbone for MacPaw's own Clean My Mac business. So they use this stuff to run their business and their product, but they thought about it and said, we made this thing that's pretty neat. We have resources to take it forward. And so they went on to expand it into what ultimately has become DevMate. And they don't just make DevMate for other people. They actually make it first and foremost for themselves. And so, they understand business. They understand the need for the kind of feedback that we get in the system. And we like it. And so it was easy for us to go all in because you could really see where it came from and the care and the attention and the understanding that went into it.
Again, I'm really intrigued by this because you have such a long history of software development. It must have shown you some features and some ease of use and all the things that we look for in your apps. Mm-hmm. You're looking to them and for you to make that kind of a transition. And I believe that you were starting to work with this while it was in beta as well.
That's true, we did. And so we started back in the fall integrating it into PDFpen 6, knowing that we would go sort of whole hog with PDFpen 7, where we adopted the licensing and activation scheme. And then recently we've used it for Text Expander 5 as well. The reason to do this is it helps us to answer questions and answer questions with real data. So for example, what is the adoption rate for an upgrade? Or how many of our users are on older versions of OS X? Or what's the difference between the performance of an ad campaign? And some of these things are kind of hard to do. I mean, we have some data, it's disparate, takes time to sort through and sift through. We can't do it all the time. Whereas now we have a dashboard that presents this in a graph in, just incredibly easy, straightforward way to see, okay, this is the adoption curve for our new update. This is how many people are still on OS, on Mavericks, excuse me. And it's just fantastic.
That's really interesting. And I was one of those who just updated a Smile product that we'll be talking about in another version of MacVoices. But I'm sitting here thinking about that upgrade process, what I did, what I went through, and now I'm starting to see where some of that stuff came from. Because as I recall, some of that stuff has not been there before, or if it had, it hadn't been quite as fleshed out. And so I'm starting to get an idea of the kind of feature sets that you're talking about that you as a developer are interested in. The thing that caught my attention, of course, was the ad campaigns and the adoption rates. Those have got to be critical for you as to where you put your time and money and effort.
Exactly. I mean, we have some basic data that we've been using and have refined sort of how we collect over the years. We certainly ask people where they got to us in our shopping cart when they check out, but that excludes anyone who purchases via the Mac App Store, and it excludes people who don't answer the question. So it's not great, but it's better than nothing. And so this is an improvement over that, but it's also an augmentation. We can compare, okay, what are we learning from DevMate? What are we learning from our shopping cart? How do these correlate? And we're able to, again, take real data and make it useful. And that's just fantastic for us. I mean, I think it also allows us to serve our users better because we have a bit better sense of where they're at. I mean, we know, for example, that the vast majority of TextExpander users are on Yosemite and were on Yosemite, pretty much the day after it was released, if not the day it was released, and many of them the day before, many days before, back in beta. And so, it wasn't so much of a concern for us to go, Yosemite only and do the things that allows us to do. And so that kind of insight is incredibly helpful to us in making a confident business decision where we know we're going to serve our customers well.
Now we're talking a lot about the feature sets, and I want to keep going there, but I want to step back just a second. Is this something that you actually do the coding in, or is this, once you're doing the coding, you drop it into DevMate and it gives you all the features we've been talking about?
It's sort of the other way around. This is something that we integrate into our code. We have a fair amount of flexibility, so they have an API that we can use. Sort of like the way that we leverage Apple's APIs, we're also able to leverage DevMate's APIs. And so our registration and activation screens are not their default. There are things that we wanted to be able to do that are not done in the way that we wanted them in their default. That said, their system is sufficiently, it's more than sufficiently, to be honest, flexible, that we were able to build the registration scheme that we wanted, and the process and all of the backing engine works great. It's just fantastic. So, we get to have our appearance as Smile, and we get to have our product look and act the way that we want, but we also have their fantastic back end that's providing the activations and that's providing the flow for the registration experience.
Okay, so maybe to give a really dumbed down interpretation of that, I can have any desktop picture I want, but it's on my Mac and it's still, the Mac works the way that it should. Is that a fair comparison?
Sure. You can have any registration experience that you want, but it has a certain flow, and DevMate provides the flow.
Got it. Okay. Let's go back to activation for a second, because that word keeps coming up. And obviously, we're talking about the process of turning on the software, the features, or all the features, or not turning it off after someone has paid for the software. How does that work, and how easy is it to implement in DevMate?
It works super easily. I mean, basically, you have your registration code, you type it in, or better yet, you copy and paste it, or even better yet, you just click the URL that we give you. And that reaches out to their server, and they up your count by 1, and off you go. Now, all of this is done encrypted, securely, etc., as you would expect. We had avoided trying to build a scheme like this ourselves for a long time. We thought, in general, that it wasn't necessary. But what we were learning is that our sort of multi-unit customers don't actually have any idea how many of their units they've installed. Now, we've just sort of assumed the honor system, right? I mean, that's the way to go. You buy a 5-unit license, and you're only going to use the 5 units. And then when you get more than that, you're going to come back to us, and we'll sell you a 10-unit license, right? Straightforward. The problem is that, and we've learned this with questions over the last maybe 2 or 3 years, is that people are like, well, so how many of my units are currently running? And do you know who has them? And questions that we just can't answer. And so they're not being dishonest. They literally just don't know. And so this scheme works much better in that it counts the activations. When you get to the end of the count, it says, I'm sorry, you need to get in touch. Now, when you do get to that point, we realize that it's absolutely critical that the user be able to continue to get their work done. And so, our way to do it is, if ever you're stuck, go ahead and buy a license, and we will, refund you immediately. Don't worry about that. Get your work done. We can sort this out of band if for any reason someone was stuck. But generally, they're not. Our support's super fast, and so far, in the instances where people have hit their limits, we've been able to work with them in a positive way to get them what they need.
So the activation thing, when you were saying that it registers an activation, I think is what you were talking about. Is that in the time limited, or is that every time I launch the software?
Right. We don't do any time limited at this point. I mean, we could, but we don't. We do, but the great thing about DevMate is that we have complete flexibility in terms of designing our licensing to work the way that we want it. And so the way that we do it is that if you want to use a demo version of TextExpander, you download it and you go ahead and use it. And it does have a certain degree of purchase encouragement. So for the first 30 days, it won't bother you at all, period, end of story. Also, if you don't expand 100 snippets and if you don't save an hour of typing, it still won't bother you. So you can go out 90, 100, 2 years, it still won't bother you. You have to actually use the product enough that then it's time to start saying, okay, well, now you've saved an hour. Then you probably have an idea of what an hour of your time is worth. So we're going to suggest that it's time for you to purchase. And then we continue to do that. We get a little bit more aggressive as you save more time and still haven't purchased. And when you get to 5 hours saved, then we stop working and say, I'm sorry. We've given you 5 hours of time saved, and now it's time to buy.
Okay. Yeah, this is fascinating. I think, again, you download something, you start to work with it, you recognize its limitations. It's something I try to ask in pretty much any software interview, is if you have a demo version, what are its limitations and how do they work? But I never thought about exactly how they could be implemented, what the mechanics of it are. And it sounds like in using DevMate, you have a lot of flexibility, but you also have a lot of control just the way you want it.
Exactly.
Interesting. So I guess, is this something that you would recommend for anyone, and especially those single programmers out there, the one-man shop who's trying to get something done and get it done the way they want? Is DevMate worth their time to invest in to get all this power and this control?
I mean, I think it's a great power-up. I think that if you're a small developer and you only have a limited amount of things that you can focus on, focusing on your licensure and your issue reporting and things like that are probably not your core competency and probably not your strong suit. And so it makes a lot of sense to choose someone who has focused on these as their core competency. This is what DevMate does, period. This is what they do for a living. Much as, I mean, it's not typically difficult to explain to a developer why it's worthwhile to use a payment processor. So why someone might choose PayPal over do-it-yourself or might choose FastSpring over do-it-yourself. I mean, there are advantages to being able to accept a German bank money order at midnight on a Sunday without having to program that yourself. So this is a similar instance of a big area of development that you don't have to take on yourself and that someone has done a really, really good job of, focused on what you need. Plus, there's the flexibility in there that you could start by adopting just the standard, this is it, we do it exactly the way that it comes in the package. And later, as you move along, say, all right, I'm going to customize this, I'm going to make this my own. And that's also a possibility. So that makes it really exciting because you can start with a minimal amount of effort and a minimal amount of learning. You can get a huge volume of power up. But you can also, as you grow or as you explore, improve the experience to exactly what you wanted.
Greg, Smile is probably a perfect example for a perfect company to ask this question of, because you have software that you release in the App Store, you have software that you release outside the App Store. Is DevMate applicable for both of those kinds of software, both of those categories, or are there are obviously some features such as the 30-day trial that aren't applicable to the App Store. How does that all play into your decision to use this?
Sure. Well, right now, the activation, of course, is for outside the App Store. But the data collection tracking, issue tracking, etc., are available to App Store apps as well. It's not their main area of focus, and I think I can understand that. But it certainly seems like an area where the ability to unify all of that over the long term is on its way.
Okay. So what kind of pricing do we have for DevMate? And I know it's not necessarily your product, but I'm hoping you can give us a rough idea of what we're talking about and how the pricing works.
For the pricing, I think I'd have to direct people to their website. It's devmate.com, and they have a pricing tab. And it depends on your usage level. And it's a little bit difficult to quantify because it sort of depends on, do you have a lot of users? Do you have a lot of activations? Do you have a lot of, what do you have a lot of? And that sort of establishes your price point. I think in ballpark terms, it's no more than 2% of your gross, and frequently less. But in terms of exactly what it would mean for you, you really have to take a look at it.
That's kind of exactly what I was looking for. It's not something that you buy a one-time price for the app and then maybe pay for the upgrades. It's more on the deployment of your software and how successful you are.
Correct. Well, also because it's an ongoing service. So your users are activating regularly and you're looking at the dashboard regularly, and your app is reporting data in terms of, how long did it take to convert from a download to an install to a purchase, those sorts of things. And so this is, entirely ongoing, and therefore their pricing matches that.
I think that you've just given an implied endorsement, but I'll still ask you to comment on it, because you are basically relying on this for your deployment for all the information we've been talking about. And yet that's kind of your lifeblood. So you have to feel pretty good about DevMate as a product, about MacPaw as a company, that they're going to be around, that they obviously must service you pretty well, because it's software, so there's got to be some service associated with it.
No, we're very impressed with them. I mean, in fact, so for example, when we did the deployment of PDFpen 7, we ran into what was a serious problem for us. And they jumped in and investigated and came up with a detailed answer. And to my great embarrassment, it turned out, of course, that we were the problem. And not only were we the problem actually literally had nothing to do with DevMate. I mean, it looked like that's where it came from, but it was entirely us. We were using an outdated library. It just was, it was just awful from our end. And they were incredibly gracious. I mean, they were absolutely phenomenal. And that's really the test, I think, of someone where, you're under the gun, you think that something's wrong with someone else's product, you're begging them for help, and they deliver. That I don't think I could possibly ask more for that. But the other thing to think about in terms of DevMate and MacPaw is that these folks have been in business for a long time, doing an excellent product. I mean, Clean My Mac is absolutely fantastic, and their recent Clean My Mac 3 is even better. And so I used to think, I'll even admit this, I hope that they don't get mad at me, I used to think that the sort of Mac cleaner things were kind of silly. I thought, I can figure that stuff out. This stuff is actually really, really good. It's like, okay, I went through your emails and found all the unreferenced attachments. I can throw all of those away. Would you like me to do that? It's like, yes. And I would never, ever, ever take the time to do that myself. So they are not just not silly. They're really fantastic. And these folks have done a great job. I mean, it's neat to see the evolution of it to knock me over. I was, horrible skeptic, and here I am. It's like, okay, now I'm practically, endorsing a pitch here. So go figure.
I like it when they approached me about this. I wasn't quite so sure, because this is not exactly the usual MacVoices beat. At the same time, I know their cleaning software. I know their hider software. I've really been impressed with the people that I met for the last year or two that we had Macworld. And so I thought, okay, this will be good to just dip our toe in and learn a little bit about it, because there is a certain amount of credibility. And you and I've had this conversation. One of the reasons I'm so comfortable with Smile is you are so transparent, so visible in the community, that I have a lot of faith in you because of that. And so sometimes these companies come out with different pieces of software, and when they're playing with your operating system, you get really nervous about who they are and what is happening under the hood and how much can you trust them. So it's great to talk to you about a company that you rely on, not just for DevMate, but also for some of their other products as well.
Absolutely. Yes. No, they've really been phenomenal, and I'm very impressed with them.
That's great. Well, I appreciate you taking the time to talk to us about it because, as I said at the outset, it's a little bit of an unusual situation, but they can, somebody from DevMate can come on and blow us away with all the stats and everything, but it's fun to talk to a real user, and especially one whose software I use, and I see the changes, and I think about now some of what DevMate must be providing to you. So very, very good, very good. The DevMate website for the folks who want to go and learn more.
Sure, they are devmate.com, DEVMATE.com.
Great. And of course, I believe it's MacPaw.com as well.
And MacPaw.com is their parent company.
To go check that out too. Greg, it's great to see you. Thank you so much for the time. We'll be talking again very soon about something.
Great. Thank you very much, Chuck. It's always a pleasure.
Folks, I'm Chuck Joyner. This is MacVoices. Go check out DevMate. Even if it's just to surf their website and maybe get a little appreciation for what goes into some of your favorite apps from Smile, of course. Until the next time, I'm Chuck Joyner. Thanks for watching. Visit MacVoices.com for links, show notes, to subscribe, to connect with Chuck on Twitter, Google+, YouTube, Facebook, LinkedIn, and the MacVoices blog. Subscribe to our weekly newsletter, the MacVoices Dispatch, to stay up to date on all the latest MacVoices news from our front page or at macvoices.com/newsletter. Do more with your Apple tech by subscribing to the free MacVoices magazine on Flipboard by visiting macvoices.com/magazine. Advertising and sponsorships handled by Backbeat Media at backbeatmedia.com. Bandwidth provided by CacheFly at cachefly.com.